I'm a skeptic, so I don't believe in a material universe. Can you prove the existence of the transcendental, the spiritual, or the eternal? In this video, we explore the most famous Western philosophical proof of the transcendent. Can you prove the world exists? In addressing the question of whether you can prove that the eternal, transcendental, or spiritual, or whatever term you would like to use here exists, I would start by turning the question on its head. Can you prove that the material universe exists? German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer stated in his book, The World as Will and Representation, it then becomes clear and certain to him that he does not know a sun and an earth, but only an eye that sees a sun, a hand that feels an earth, that the world around him is there only as representation, in other words, only in reference to another thing, namely that which represents, and this is himself. Schopenhauer is pointing here to a clear and, if you think about it, rather obvious fact. Everything you have ever experienced has happened within your own consciousness. Everything you know exists. Everything I know exists. Everything that any human has ever experienced or known has been a representation, a perceptual event within the mind. You have never experienced a sun directly. You have only experienced a sensory perception of looking at the sun, which occurred within your consciousness. The idea that there exists a mystical substance called matter, which exists oh so conveniently outside of our consciousness where we cannot reach it, is thoroughly unscientific. Not only is there no empirical evidence for such a thing, but by definition, there never could be for us. If there were, we would have no access to it. As such, it should be automatically excluded from any scientific worldview. To dualism and beyond. This is not to say that the mind is all that exists. Following what seems to me to be the strictest possible interpretation of what Descartes called radical doubt, Schopenhauer finds himself left with only two things that he cannot doubt exist: a subject or something which knows or perceives, an object or something which is known or is perceived. This is, of course, a reformulation of the Cartesian dualism of mind and matter presented in René Descartes' Discourse on the Method, a book which he himself claimed to contain proof of the existence of God. The famous quote, "Cogito ergo sum," presents the same basic thought expressed by the above quote from Schopenhauer, that the only thing you can really be sure exists is your own mind. The mind-matter dualism of Descartes is replaced by a subject-object dualism. This is, I think, more accurate, since the mind contains thoughts and feelings that can be known, and hence more properly belong to the object than the subject. It also reveals to us something obscured in the terminology of Cartesian dualism. The existence of a subject implies the existence of an object, and vice versa. There cannot exist a thing which knows unless there is also a thing which is known, and nothing can ever be known unless there exists something capable of knowing. The two sides of dualism are therefore revealed to be two sides of the same non-dual coin, each dependent on the other for their existence. But putting aside the deeper layer about which we can say little, pondering this duality allows us to infer some things about the nature of existence that we can be reasonably certain of. More certain than we could be that the material universe exists independently of consciousness, at any rate. A mind is not physical and so is not extended, doesn't take up space, and is not divisible, as physical matter is. Descartes' arguments for dualism. The subject, being defined purely as that which knows, is not itself known. We know this with certainty, because if it were known, then by definition it would cease to be the subject and become the object. The subject is therefore unknowable, or ineffable as some prefer to say. Having no extension within space, it is by definition not limited by spatial constraints. This may not be the definition of infinite that you are familiar with. Perhaps you have thought of infinity as occupying all of space, but nevertheless it fulfills the definition, and without movement through space, it is also not defined or limited by time, and so may be thought of as eternal. In summary, if one is to take skepticism to its most extreme application and doubt the existence of everything which can be doubted, one is left with only two things which we can prove empirically, by direct experience, to exist: the transcendental and the objective. A final note on empiricism. Some people may claim that empirical proof requires sensory observation and measurement. In the article mentioned above, Peter, while raising what he calls direct apprehension as an alternative, also seems to subscribe to this view. So I would like to end this article with a quote from the Cambridge Dictionary's definition of empirical, emphasis my own. Based on what is experienced or seen, rather than on theory. Empirical observation is based on what you directly experience and is not, as some may have it, artificially limited to sensory stimuli. There is, therefore, no valid argument that the philosophical inquiries of the likes of Descartes and Schopenhauer, based as they are on the direct observation of their own existence and those things that can be reliably inferred from such observation, are not empirical.